I took on responsibility at a very young age because of my mom. The first time I remember her attempting suicide, I was 4. So I kind of had to grow up and be the adult. So I didn't really have that childhood. I lived in a lot of fear. And so what happened was I had to kind of reparent myself. I had to learn about nurturing. The type of cancer I had was breast cancer, which we know the breast is around nurturing, and that's what I was missing in my life. So being able to see how all of these things had shaped me also gave me the opportunity to learn and to turn that around for myself, to say, what can I take out of this that I can continue to use in a positive way and not just bypass what's happened, understand it, and then move forward into what I do want. So it's a way to see, what are those challenges? What are the lessons for you that you are here to learn? So, it's whether you believe we're a spiritual being having this human experience, or what that we often talk about our purpose. And this is part of what comes forward when we can see it for what it is, that these are lessons that we're learning.
You're listening to Inspire Me with Jay, where science meets spirit and stories of meditation and the near-death experience awaken what's possible within us all. I'm Jay, and this is your moment to be inspired. Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay. I'm your host, Jay Spillers. I have a guest today, Robyn. How are you, Robyn?
I'm great. Nice to see you, Jay.
It's good to meet you. So, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about your story? How you got into what you do and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. For me, it was a lot of trauma growing up, and my mom was suicidal. My dad was alcoholic. So I didn't have a lot of stability growing up, and conflict was very dangerous, right? Because of the anger outbursts and things like that. So my mom stayed quiet, and my dad would have these anger outbursts. And then my mom and I moved around a lot. I was in foster care for a while. So things weren't stable at all. And so I really craved that. But at the same time, I also wondered why some people were aware and other people weren't. And so that was always kind of a question in my mind. And so I learned a lot, trained in psychology, counseling, conflict resolution, and all these other modalities now. And then when I had cancer 25 years ago, then I really had to look at everything and how I got there. And that was when I really brought in the emotional component, that I'd been doing a lot of things intellectually, but I hadn't really dealt with the emotional aspects. And from there, I learned the meditation and then the Enneagram and the motivational map and these other tools. So it was this process of learning to deal with my own inner conflict, and then how to deal with people in the world. And so that's what I love to do now, is help people understand themselves and why those tensions are there, both within themselves and with other people, and how to deal with that.
So what is Enneagram?
The Enneagram is a psycho-spiritual tool to understand our personality and how we kind of get stuck in it. So we come into the world with a predisposition, kind of a way of seeing the world. And then, of course, our culture and our family and everything buys or works with that initial way of being tends to fall within these different 9 types. And so we have this worldview that tends to give us areas that we focus on And when we can learn about that and see how we get stuck, then we can go to that deeper part, to the real core of who we are, and then learn to bring in the other aspects and to open our ability to bring in different ways of seeing, understanding those automatic patterns and moving beyond them, because so much of it is we have these unconscious patterns. We just go on autopilot, wonder why we have the same conflicts all the time or the same issues coming up, when it's that pattern that we haven't been able to see for ourselves yet.
So, like, what are some of the tools that it uses?
Yeah, so the Enneagram itself has 9 styles or types, and then there's different pathways for growth. So some people will do an assessment online, which doesn't go deep enough from my perspective, because often it's a starting point to look at ways that we can then start to self-observe and say, this is the way that I notice I'm doing this particular thing and why I'm doing that. So then we can say, okay, what I need to do is bring in more of this and let go of some of these ways I hold on tightly to certain beliefs or different ways of being that don't serve me anymore. They were great when I was a kid, and these survival mechanisms that we brought in to stay safe or to feel and get what we didn't get that we felt we needed. And then as we mature and get to see those patterns, and we can relax them. And there's a lot of different depths with the Enneagram, different aspects of it. So just knowing your type is a starting point. And the biggest thing with the Enneagram is not to get stuck in that way of describing yourself as that type. Instead, it's seeing what the patterns are and then going beneath it to seeing that we have more options. So there's a lot of people out there that talk about the Enneagram, but don't go to that deeper part of how do we go beyond the type.
So, are you working as a therapist right now?
I'm not a therapist. I do a lot of kind of coaching, consulting. The counseling part kind of naturally comes through. So I'm not in BC here to be under the umbrella. You do need a master's. And so although I'm certified, I'm not in the category where people can come to me as a practitioner and get refunded by services. So my services are kind of a combination: coaching, counseling. Sometimes it's just using a lot of my intuitive skills, and specific ways of bringing in the practical aspect of it so that we can see what is the pattern, what are my choices, and then specific tools and processes to use to move beyond that towards what we want and get in alignment with what's important to us. So for example, with the motivational map, it gives us, again, 9, this kind of universal number that we see in numerology and all these different systems, where if I know what my top motivators are, that gives me more energy, because motivation is really just energy. And then I can see if there's any potential conflicts within those top 3 especially. And then from there, we can look at what do you need to energize those parts so you are fully energized towards what you want, and what are some of the things that hold you back with those, and where do we need to parcel out those tensions and say, both these things are important to me. And when I have that clarity of what they are, then I can decide how much time I need to spend on this and how much on that, so that both those motivators are met. And I'm not having that push-pull inside of me, or stepping forward and then stepping back.
So, Is a lot of what you do spiritual work? Because you did mention spiritual.
I think spiritual, it depends on the person. It's not necessarily spiritual in the sense that, um, except in the meditation class. The meditation class is definitely more the connection to that bigger part of ourselves, that spiritual part of ourselves. And the other parts don't necessarily bring that in unless that's something the person is interested. Personally, my belief is that we have to take care of ourselves in all ways. I think there's that harmony, spiritual, mental, emotional, physical. And so I do tend to find people who are interested in making sure that those different aspects of their life are included. So it doesn't mean we necessarily deal a lot with the spiritual if that's not where the person is at. I believe in meeting people where they're at.
You're listening to the Inspire Me with Jay podcast. Please do like and subscribe to the channel, bringing hope and inspiration to the world.
And then seeing what are the specific things that are important to them, and then helping them bring more harmony and alignment into that. And it's the same with teams. I wouldn't necessarily go into the spiritual part with a team. There's more about how do we work together? What are the practical things about communication? How open are people to change? What are the type of things that you need to do to make sure that all the team members are in the right roles, or getting the information they need, feel included? Because we know with engagement, which is really low, that unless we feel energized by what we do, we're just not going to do a great job. And for someone who is a business owner, we have the revolving door of staff and all these other things. So it really depends on the context. I'm very much about these places where, what is the issue? And let's go from there, because we can't just do one thing for everybody. We're all individual. We all have our own needs and wants. And so it's about really personalizing whatever the services are that they need.
And so how did you get into meditation?
That was after the cancer. So I was in this place where I had finished treatment and I was looking at going back into the workplace. I worked in a very stressed out business that people had a lot of dealings with the public, and it could be very stressful. And I had gone really deep within myself. I spent 6 months basically going inward with myself to really understand, why did I get there and what was going on? And that's when I really realized that the emotions that I'd buried were the kind of tipping point in not really living a life that was aligned with what I needed and wanted. And I'd kind of shut down that spiritual aspect because of different things that had happened in my life, and not understanding spirituality and religion could be two different things because of some of the things that happened in my family around religion. And so I'd had a lot of loss in my life already from different things. And for a lot of people, cancer is about loss. But for me, it was about reopening to the spiritual part of myself. And when I kind of looked back at it, I could see aspects in my life or situations where I had those connections that made sense looking at it from this perspective now. For example, my mom and I were separated for a year, and I was living with my aunt and uncle, and I was at school. I was grade 2, and we had this art project to do. And I was a very shy and quiet kid. And for some reason, I felt like I needed to do that art project in the morning. And she's like, no, we're doing it this afternoon. And I got a little bit insistent, but, you know, she's a teacher. So I went home at lunch and there was my mom to pick me up, but no one had told me. I didn't know anything about it. And so I could see these kind of things. And then before the cancer, I kept hearing in my mind, something big in your life is going to change. And something would happen. It's like, nope, that's not it. And then something else until that diagnosis. And I was just really open to the information. Like I started to receive information, color, all these different connections that I had dismissed for a lot of years, and could see where I'd made bad decisions because of not listening to that part of myself and not listening to that higher part of me and to spirit. So what happened after doing a retreat, there's this place between when you're finished treatment and getting back into life. It's kind of this limbo. And there was a book I read called Dancing in Limbo that was really amazing to help me to see how there was this place where I'm not the same person anymore. And I'm just becoming, I'm trying to figure out what my new normal is. And so I went to this retreat that really helped me open up. And then I thought, how can I be around all these stressed out people? I'm just so sensitive now. Felt so vulnerable and open. And I met someone at a wine, cheese, and tarot card reading party of all things. And she said, oh, I took this class where you get energy shields. And so I was in class the next week. And the first week I felt better. And you get 2 shields in the level 1. So I completed that. And then I became a teacher of that. And then our level 2, which is the shamanic. And I also teach children. And I also do a workshop for the anxiety and depression. And so I love teaching it. I love seeing the shift in people. If people are ready for it, it's always a place where we have to be willing to go deep within ourselves.
So is meditation probably fundamental to what you do in terms of your work?
For myself, I have 2 practices. One is with that system that I teach, and the other one is through the Enneagram, where we talk about our 3 centers. So we've got our physical, or our gut, our heart, and our head. And we have a preference. We all have a preference for which one we kind of tend to like. And then often there's one that we don't pay as much attention to. And we need all 3. We have to be in our body to be here in the world. We have to open our heart and have that vulnerability to have connection with people. And we need the head to help us to navigate. And when we're doing them separately, things don't work out so well. So what I do is have a practice, and I do this practice with clients. So we start with doing some breathing into each of the centers, and then breathing into all 3 centers at once, so that we're coming from a place where we're not just thinking in one or thinking or being in one modality. So that is the part, I would say, the easiest part of the meditational process I use to understand is just the 3 centers and learning to be present in each of them. It sounds simple, and it's challenging at the same time because of our natural patterns that we have.
Well, do you practice meditation yourself every day for like a certain period of time?
I do. I have my regular meditation that I do through the system I teach, which is more of an active style. It's a different than, trying to forget your thoughts kind of idea, or the mindfulness. So when I started meditation, I was doing the candle yoga meditation as a teenager. And then in college, I learned a transcendental meditation, and that was cool because the Beatles did it. And now this one, which is an active style. So you're actually doing things in your meditation. So it helps the more Western mind be able to do the work, so that you're bringing in your grounding system, you're bringing in your systems to bring in light and love of the universe to fuel you, you're using your shields, you're using your dream interpretation position to learn about some of the unconscious things that are going on. So there's very specific parts of that I would use in my morning meditation, depending what's going on in my day. But those basic kind of set myself up for being really grounded and present and energized by that universal love energy, whatever you want to call it. And then I do the practice. I do a 10-minute practice with the 3 centers. And I find the two together because I really like the course I teach on the active meditation, which really connects us to that spiritual part. And the Enneagram is kind of more, I mean, it's not just practical, but it is in a way. It's kind of, I see the two work together so well. Each of them by themselves are wonderful, and combining them I find are really, really helpful for me. So there's not a specific time, but I also always do both of those.
Well, so do you still practice transcendental meditation, and do you find that it is more powerful than other forms of meditation? Because it seems like I hear a lot of from people that do transcendental meditation that, oh, well, you know, this is the best and it works better than everything else and blah, blah, blah. And I can't see anything online where it says, I mean, it's probably good because it's a form of meditation, but that it's any better than any other form of meditation necessarily in terms of mental health and well-being.
Well, the thing is that we have so many different styles now. I think that how we used to see meditation and what it is today is much different. We've got the mindfulness, we've got walking meditation. You know, I love to do the labyrinth, especially like New Year's Eve, things like that, where it's like, it's almost like we're going into ourselves and then coming back out. And I always have some insight. For myself, I didn't practice it as diligently as I do the current one, which I've been doing for 24 years now, almost 25 years. And so whatever you stick with is going to help you. For when I did transcendental meditation, it was very kind of hush hush about what your mantra was, but really all it was having a mantra and repeating that over and over again in your meditation. And I got bored with that. So, but I know when I was at university, there was groups that would meet and do the meditational work together. I think for myself, I like the system I've learned, well, both of the systems, but the one I teach is ever expanding. There's different levels you can do. And so I'm learning new skills and tools energetically to support myself and other people over time. And being the kind of curious person I am, that really works for me. And I find that having that ability to have precision, to me, it's physics of energy, right? And that's what meditation helps us to bring in. It's just like our brainwave patterns when we go into those different brainwave patterns with meditation. So I don't fault anyone for doing any particular kind. I think it's what really works for you and what you're going to continue to do, even going for a walk in nature and just being present to what's there. The biggest idea with the Enneagram is being present, which is the same for meditation. So the more that we can bring our presence to here and now and not be thinking about the future or the past in the moment that we're in, yes, we certainly have thoughts about those things and we need those, but how do we actually stay present to what's going on here? So as we're having this conversation, how can I be open to what's here and present? And meditation is what helps us to do that.
Well, I mean, like for me personally, I like to do eclectic meditation. Like when I'm meditating, I might change I might focus on my breath for a while. I might do some kind of loving kindness or gratitude. You might do some kind of visualization, affirmations. I just kind of bounce around. I do a lot of reflection on different things, like certain core values and things like that. So I don't really have like a style that I'm wedded to in that sense. But what is the style of meditation that you do? What is the name of it? Do you have videos on it online or anything, or?
What it's through an academy. It's called Training and Power Academy. So it's an active style of meditation. There is a information session I do if people are interested. And so I will walk them through, talk about the process, and then walk them through a couple of meditations so they get the idea of what an active meditation is compared to the more passive style that a lot of people have been exposed to. And so it's like going in and feeling the grounding and doing the different things, sort of like what you're doing in your meditation, where you're not just doing one thing, right? You're going in and doing particular things that keep you involved and are having you open to information that we don't tap into as easily when we're busy with other things. We need that quiet space to listen to those parts of ourselves that need to be heard. Otherwise, they come out in these kind of weird ways, right? And part of it is the shadow work is one of the other things that helps to process that. But the meditation is really experiential. So there's not a lot of videos or something you can just go to and this is how I'm going to follow it. So it's a free information session, and then the class is over 4 weeks. So once a week to learn the full system at that basic level. And what's really unique about the system, there is a way that as a teacher, we actually shift your vibration. So I'm learning, takes about 6 years to train into this. You're bringing in that universal energy, and then I'm bringing it through to raise your vibration so that you have that shift in consciousness so that you can bring those unconscious patterns forward into your conscious mind. And so when we do that, we can have that ongoing shift and we don't go back to how we were before. So we say that it's the equivalent of 7 years of training in Tibet, not intellectually, but energetically. So having that shift gives us that new perspective.
Well, do you have like a podcast or a YouTube channel where you give talks or anything?
I do have a few talks. I'm trying to think what's on my YouTube right now. And I have some other talks that are coming out this year. Well, actually, within the next couple of weeks, talking more about the conflict. Though I'm just trying to. The main way I would say to connect there's probably some things on my YouTube, and also just to reach out. I put the information sessions up on the website, and then people can come and connect and learn about it, so they can experience it because it is something that we need to experience.
Well, so
And
what are the people that... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say too that I talk a little bit about it in a chapter. I was in, 6 compilation books, and one of those is From Sofa to Soaring is my chapter, and it's for free on the website, and just talks about that journey from the cancer into shifting into that different way, that spiritual way of being more in the world.
Well, so, and you work with teams and individuals and groups and things like that. So how does that work?
So with the children's course, like it's the same model except simplified is the word for younger audiences. And then with groups and teams, that tends to be more the map, the motivational map, and the Enneagram. And out of that comes a profile of the group to say what is needed. Is that something that you would like for your workplace? So it could be some meditations, workplace meditations. It could be a download. I have one meditation that I offer on relationships, and that's actually on the website as well. So it really depends on the group, how open they are to it, and what their needs are. So if I do have some more simplified, I would guess, meditations to use in the workplace that are more beginner meditations, so that they get an idea of what meditation is about, learn to bring that presence in more into the workplace, into their lives. And then if they want to take it further and go into the paid class, they can. And I find just those simple, smaller ones that just bring us present, that help us to see that we have options, because we're raised in a way that we believe we don't have a choice when we really do. And when we can bring in meditation, then we get to see more of those options and what we want to actually bring in and how we want to be, rather than just those automatic ways that we tend to react.
Well, I think, isn't it one of the key themes of your work is that trauma and challenges presents opportunities, right? So how does that actually work?
Yeah. So, for example, for myself, I took on responsibility at a very young age because of my mom. The first time I remember her attempting suicide, I was 4. So I kind of had to grow up and be the adult. So I didn't really have that childhood. I lived in a lot of fear. And so what happened was I had to kind of reparent myself. I had to learn about nurturing. The type of cancer I had was breast cancer, which we know the breast is around nurturing, and that's what I was missing in my life. So being able to see how all of these things had shaped me also gave me the opportunity to learn and to turn that around for myself, to say, what can I take out of this that I can continue to use in a positive way, and not just bypass what's happened, understand it, and then move forward into what I do want. So it's a way to see, what are those challenges? What are the lessons for you that you are here to learn? So, it's whether you believe we're a spiritual being having this human experience, or what that we often talk about our purpose. And this is part of what comes forward when we can see it for what it is, that these are lessons that we're learning. And how are we going to deal with it? We can ignore it. And if we ignore it, like myself, it gives us a little nudges. And then when we don't listen, we get hit over the head. And for me, it was cancer, right? The last place we're going to listen is our physicality. And we see this with all sorts of health issues where if we're not willing to change, sometimes we're forced to change. And so that can happen in a lot of variety of ways. And so when we can actually see what was the deeper meaning of that for you. So for example, me, the nurturing and learning to have a voice. I didn't have a voice growing up. I didn't feel safe enough to express who I was or what was important to me, or even know, right? And we see this people in the so-called midlife crisis or whatever it is, because we've carried on these patterns, these family dynamics, all these different things that we feel we should do, whether it's societal or family culture, even our gender. And then we realize, I reached that goal, but what did I get out of it? I'm not any happier. So what is really, truly important to me? And that's when people will stop and spend that time going in. And that's what I can help with to help you clarify what's going on, and then using the different ways to help you integrate it, because these are experiences that we need to integrate into our lives and not make them wrong, not make ourselves wrong for surviving whatever we needed to survive, or lead your life in a way that is full of resentment and anger. Yes, we need to deal with those emotions, but if we get stuck there, we're not going to thrive in our life. We're not going to have relationships or the kind of life we want, because that's going to just hold us back and eat us up.
So, do a lot of people that you work with have trauma?
I would say everyone does to a certain degree. It's like anything, it's on a continuum. And I think this is one of the big issues of people who compare. We kind of automatically do that as humans, and it's so unhelpful. But we do. It's like, my trauma is worse or better, or they have it worse, so I should just be okay with what happened to me. We see this with it's almost like, I don't want to deal with it, so it wasn't that bad. But really, whatever it was, those patterns are ingrained from childhood. And if we don't address them, that little inner child is running the show. We're not going to be a spiritual adult. We're not going to be running our life from a place where we're in charge. So if we can actually do some of that and bring our inner child along, often I find inner child work comes up almost all the time when I'm working with individuals, because there are those patterns there, places where we didn't feel seen or heard, because we all want to be seen and heard and acknowledged for who we are. And these messages get skewed when we're young, and we don't feel we got what we needed, and so we act out in different ways. This is how we self-sabotage and do all of that. So learning to accept, yes, that was hurtful, that was painful. How can I just appreciate that about myself, that I went through that, be kind and compassionate. And that's another reason why I love the Enneagram, is really to help us to learn that compassion for ourselves and others. We're usually pretty good at giving it to others, but what about ourselves? And that's what I found for myself, right? It was like I was the tough taskmaster, and I was just not being kind to myself or compassionate and doing everything for everyone else.
Well, I think that's one of the keys of meditation in general, is that to cultivate self-compassion first, and then we're able to expand out and give compassion to others around us.
Yeah, and I think that especially, how women are raised in North American culture anyway, is they give so much to others. And so sometimes that compassion becomes compassion fatigue because they're overgiving. And so learning that what you're giving out, you need to bring in too. So we talk about grief, and grief allows us to build that compassion, right? Because that sadness, that grief about our human condition, about ourselves, people in our lives that we love, helps us to open our heart, to open our willingness to have that compassion. And sometimes it's some very simple things to just start that connection. If you look at a small child or a small animal, we have that sense of love and connection and caring that kind of gets primed in the pump, right? Where it's like I can feel that kind of protective, compassionate kind of energy, and now let's bring that in for me. And sometimes it's being that conscious of it. Yes, meditation allows us to slow down, to bring that in, to feel it, to connect with ourselves. And sometimes that next step is understanding that sometimes something external needs to kickstart that so we can feel it. Because when people are first starting, sometimes they just feel numb and they say, I don't feel anything. And that's okay, again, to not make ourselves wrong about it. It's just you're learning. And we allow children to learn, so why not adults too, and not make ourselves wrong for that?
Well, I mean, if you're going from the external inward, does something that helps as a tool is to maybe think of a loved one you have that you genuinely know loves and cares about you a lot, and then try to reflect that love and compassion towards yourself, like kind of see what they see in you and feel for you.
Sometimes the only challenge with that sometimes is love can be conditional when we're in our normal human. Um, so it depends on that relationship with the person. Like if you really feel that, if you have someone in your life that you just feel that they give you so much of that you don't feel that you have to be or do things a certain way to receive that, that's beautiful. And so it might be a person for an individual. It might not, because of all the strings that get attached. When we talk about love, we get caught up in that human kind of love, which is, sticky and all these different things that can be challenging, instead of that more universal love and light of the universe that we haven't really always learned to tune into. And that's part of why I like the Enneagram too, because when I'm doing the process with my head center, for example, one of my teachers talks about me, we. So there's me and we. And so there's me, this universal light and spirit. And then there's the whole universe with everyone else, because we're all connected. And so it's this way of tuning into that energy of that we're all love and light. And so whether that is a person, whether that is an animal. I find often pets, and we see the proliferation of pet owners now because of people feeling alone and lonely.
So are there any projects you're working on, books, things like that? Or what, maybe books you've already written?
I've been in 6 books. One was about parents and dealing with conflict. The other one was the Sofa to Soaring book. And While We Were Silent is another one. They're all listed on the website. So one was on confidence. So they're a variety because I believe that we need all of these different things. And I've got some ideas for a book on my own that still are kind of germinating. And so I'm not quite ready to bring that forward yet, but it is certainly something I'm considering in the next while. And so the projects that I'm working on right now is some signature talks, so to do more speaking engagements, and I'm looking at potentially an Enneagram series of workshops, starting with beginners to understand what the system is, and then doing some more of that kind of deeper work, because I find nowadays people are enjoying the group kind of processes because they get to connect with other people. Being in a group is very powerful. We need to work with ourselves individually, with another person, and in a group. Like there's community. And so we need all of those parts of our journey to work through for our full growth. And when we see that we're not alone, that what your problems and my problems and how we think about things are very similar, we get to see we're not so different, that we're more similar than different. And it's a very comforting thought, because we think, we're weird or we're this, but we're all weird together.
So you have a website. What is your website?
alifeofchoice.ca. I'm in Canada, so it's .ca.
Okay. So is there like one final word you'd like to leave with the audience before we close out?
One of the main things I learned in conflict resolution, which I think is something that you can use in all parts of your life, and that is be curious. All behavior makes sense. And you could use this as something you do in your meditation, in your daily going about your life, and whether it's another person or yourself, just taking that pause to say, yeah, what's going on here, instead of being so much in reaction. And this is what the main key, right, for meditation is about, not having to be so reactive, that we can self-manage and take that breath and understand that we have choices in what we do. And having that curiosity about what's going on is key. That helps us to have the pause, to take a breath, and to choose something different if we choose to, at least to have options.
Yeah, well, thanks for being on today. It was a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you so much for your platform and sharing it with others.